There's nothing else for me to add, ladies and gentlemen, except to say, can we all please rise to our feet as we welcome onto stage to deliver this year's Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture, Professor Bathily.
Please be seated. Good evening, everybody. President Thabo Mbeki, my comrade in arms, champion of African Renaissance, Madame Mbeki, Madame Geraldine Fraser, the chairperson of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation. We usually say in Nigeria, all protocol observed, to avoid misspelling names, to avoid missing someone who will be angry with you. So, all protocol observed. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here tonight moved by this audience. People of my generation in the late 50s and early 60s have been bred and fed by the principles of the struggle against colonialism, against apartheid, against racism, for a better humanity, for the liberation of the people of the world, for a new international order which will be beneficial to all the peoples, races, and cultures the world over. Today, I'm particularly moved when I think some 40 years back, 50 years back, 60 years back, through demonstrations we conducted as students in Dakar University, and later on, anti-apartheid demonstration in London, which always end at Trafalgar Square. Moved by the sentiment of the comrades, the friends, colleagues who have gone. There are many. On this special occasion, I cannot but remember those who has fallen. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like at the outset pay a special tribute to President Thabo Mbeki, a visionary leader, a man of action, of principles, whom I had the opportunity to see at work before and during his tenure as President of the Republic of South Africa. I remember the days in '87 when he led the ANC delegation in Dakar to meet what we call then the liberal or whatever denomination, to discuss about the future of Africa, and South Africa particularly. From different positions and capacities, I attended a number of meetings, summit of the Organization of African Unity from the back row. And I appreciate the way he conducted deliberations. He intervened with passion for the cause of the African continent in the early 2000s. I attended meeting he convened for the Progressive Government Forum, which brought together like-minded leaders from the world over. I attended meetings where he passionately invited the African diaspora to be part and parcel of the African Union. All these are actions which demonstrates his full commitment for the continent of Africa. Comrade Mbeki, I wish you well. Ladies and gentlemen, historians use the term scramble to refer to the first competition among European countries to conquer and colonize Africa during the last quarter of the 19th century. The scramble for Africa was symbolized by the famous Berlin Conference, convened by the then chancellors of Germany, Otto von Bismarck. The conference convened from November 1884 to February 1885. It led, as everybody knows, to the partition of Africa, to the conquest and the colonization of our continent. Here in Southern Africa, it took a special turn, but was the Anglo-Boers Wars, which led to the constitution of the Republic of South Africa, the Union of South Africa, of course, which sealed the alliance between the Boers and the British colonizers at the expense of the African people, and later on translated into the apartheid system. The motive behind the conquest and colonization of Africa is still a subject of heated debate among historians, political scientists, political economists, and ideologists of the colonial system. Nobody today will argue convincingly that the so-called civilizing mission was the motive of the conquest and colonization of Africa. Nobody can defend this thesis today. However, this thesis is developed in a more refined form, which is ideological and political, dedicated to belittle the importance of Africa in the international system. As early as the 60s, one famous British historian, John Gallagher, I don't know if he has something to do with John Gallagher wrote a famous book in 1961 when the process of independence started in Africa. Gallagher, they said in their book, Africa and the Victorians, the official mind of imperialism. But in fact, in the 19th century, the British were not interested in colonizing and conquering Africa because Africa did not represent much for them. This is the thesis. Robinson and Gallagher said in their book that it is only for geopolitical reasons that Britain was interested in conquering Africa and colonizing the territories. The main interest for Britain when, according to them, was India. Britain wanted to prevent France from occupying Africa to secure for themselves the road to India, the sea road to India. This was the thesis. Other historians from the Western point of view, the Canadian historian Kanya Forstner, in his book, The Military Conquest of West Africa, a study in military imperialism. Kanya Forstner's thesis is about the fact that, in fact, the French conquest of West Africa was not motivated by economic reasons, but it was a deliberate decision by the French military to recoil from their defeat at the hands of the German during the War of 1870 between France and Germany. The French military were humiliated and they want to come to Africa to sort of compensate. Another refinement of this thesis was developed, this time by a French historian, Henri Bruchevig, L'impérialisme colonial français en Afrique, mythe ou réalité. French colonial imperialism in Africa, myth or reality. And for him, it is a myth because France, for him, was not motivated by economic interests. And he went along with the same thesis developed by Kanya Forstner. That is, it was the role of the military who decided. And of course, with all these apologetic theses for colonialism tend to downplay the economic importance of Africa, and hence go along with the so-called civilizing mission of Europe in Africa, as the main motive of the conquest and colonization of Africa. But I don't want to labor on that, because now massive evidence are shown by historians, economists, political economists, to show the importance of Africa economically for Europe in the 19th century. And this was not the first attempt of scramble by Europeans. It was the third scramble to Africa, the 19th century scramble. The first scramble started as early as the end of the 15th century, when Spain and Portugal decided to divide the world in two parts. You know, in the 15th century, Spain and Portugal were the most important colonial power. Through the technique of navigation, the circumnavigation of Africa, the colonization of the Americas, Spain and Portugal were most powerful states at the end of the 14th century and during the 15th and 16th century, decided to divide the world. Pope Alexander VI decided to condone this division of the world. West of what we may call the Cape Verde Islands today will belong to Portugal, to Spain. And Portugal will share the east of that meridian from Cape Verde. And this has been the first international document where European powers would decide to divide the world among themselves for their colonial ambition. The second one, of course, is the episode of the Atlantic slave trade, which is well known. After the first decade of independence, what we have seen is, through the debate about the debts, the European powers, through the Bretton Woods institutions, decide to put in place the structural adjustment program, which led to the inclusion, further inclusions of the African countries into the liberal economy, with all what goes with it. So we have seen, since the 15th century, the intrusion of a colonial motive, exploitation led by, the exploitation as the main objective by European colonizers. We all know, I don't want to go into the details how Africa, Asia, Americas were led to be left behind. Because before the 14th century, Africa was among the leading region in terms of the economy, on this continent, which is the cradle of humanity, the human species emerged on the African continent. It is from Africa, but the other part of the world were inhabited through migration from Africa. And this continent has known sophisticated system, economic system, government system, has achieved in the realm of technology, whether transformation of the minerals, the invention of agriculture, domestication of plants, domestication of animals. All this is seen through the remnant of prehistory in today Sahara, before the Sahara was a desert, thousands of years ago. These are Africans. What happened after all that is what we see today. The colonial pattern of relationship remain very much the same. The continent is still in a form of bondage, political dependency, economic dependency, and now even further military dependency. The new scramble of Africa, which we see today, can be demonstrated through several types of manifestations we can see for our eyes. Africa is today in partnership with at least 30 entities, not only regional grouping outside the continent, but also individual country. We can watch on television every year, year in and out, all the African head of state and government, 54 of them, are convened to meetings with one head of state of those countries. Those summits of partnership are much more attended than the AU meetings. We can see that. This accounts for the level of dependency of Africa. The same motives as previously are still there. Those partnerships, no matter how you qualify them, how people tell they are, yes, we want a win-win solution, we want to help you, it's for aid, to help Africa grow, it's to help Africa development. But in actual fact, what do we see? For the last 2 decades, those partnerships are going on. What development did it bring to Africa? Like the previous scrambles for Africa, today's scramble for Africa is about securing the markets of Africa, securing the natural resources of Africa for the competing so-called partners of Africa. This is the reality, the truth of the matter. Whether it's about the logging industry, deforestation is going on. Arable lands of Africa are being depleted, increasing the tragic consequences of climate change, of desertification, rarefaction of the water resources, the depletion of marine resources, the ocean biodiversity, of course, the minerals of Africa, solid and liquid minerals. The market of Africa for investment along the lines of a colonial model of dependence. Here again, the contributions of President Mbeki has been important. Through his commission on the illicit financial flows from Africa, the findings of his commission has demonstrated how through inadequate taxation, inadequate fiscal policies, corruption, and other illicit means, the continent is deprived of immense resources, which are counted in billions of dollars. Further, today, the continent is faced with another scourge. The military buildup on the continent. The military buildup under the pretext of fighting against violent extremism, terrorism. When you look at the map of Africa today, and you look at the level, the extent of foreign military presence on the continent, as a historian, I cannot but remind me of what has happened at the end of the 19th century, the period of conquest and colonization. There are more military presence on the foreign military presence on the continent today than even in the 19th century at the time of the colonial conquest and colonization. This is really worrisome. So the scramble, the new scramble for Africa is today a threat, continued threat for the development of the continent. It's a continued risk for the stability of the continent, a continued risk for the unity of the continent. These are facts which are documented by all researchers in the field of the economy, politics, security. Furthermore, the continent is driven into geopolitical rivalries among competing powers of the world from all sides. This also is a fact, a reality. Therefore, the issue today for us as Africans, for us as progressive Africans, for us all as committed to a better world, committed to international relations geared to the benefit of all the peoples of the world. To be aware of this situation and to take action. So the question remains how to do it. What is to be done? The dreams of the founding fathers and mothers of the Organization of African Unity, who created that continental organization. Those dreams have to be investigated again, revisited, and we must reflect on how to make them come true. And of course, as students, young men and women, those days, girls, when the OAU was launched by Kwame Nkrumah and his peers, we were expecting Africa to rise up. Our leaders to help our people create the conditions not only for the political liberation of Africa, as Kwame Nkrumah put it. He said, create first, seek first the political kingdom, and everything else will be added on to it. It is true, what was the first phase? We have seen in my young age when I was in secondary school, I have seen in less than a few months so many flags coming out of the African continent. I was in a secondary school where we had my colleagues, my friends coming from different colonies. In less than 6 months, as Harold Macmillan, the Prime Minister of Britain, used to say, this continent, Africa, the wind of change is blowing over this continent of Africa, whether we like it or not. So many flags were raised, new national anthems. But we have seen that new flag, national anthems are not enough for liberation. Liberation needs more than that. Go beyond those signs like national anthem and flags, national flags. So we were very, very excited, thrilled about the creation of OAU at that time. But decades later, we have to acknowledge the fact that we must go beyond and break the colonial ties in the field of the economy, in the fields of politics, to assert real sovereignty for the continents, its governments, and its people. This is what independence is about. Therefore, we are faced today with an obligation, a moral as well as a political obligation, to revive the liberation project as a total project, a project of renaissance for our continent. To do this, of course, I'm not a candidate for any election to put forward a program, but I sincerely believe from the experience that the revival of the liberation project can be effective only if we engage to reshape the course of African history at different levels. First and foremost, the present situation, it is obvious that the new scramble of Africa and the way it plays out stems from the leadership crisis on the continent. Africa needs a new leadership to reverse the dynamic unleashed by this new scramble. The issue here is about to consolidate the democratic governance on the continent. The rule of law, transparency, uphold civil liberties, transform qualitatively political parties, which tend more and more to become cliques who are governed by self-serving leaders, ambitious leaders. We need vibrant civil societies in Africa who can tell the truth to any power that be, the press, it's important on educating and informing the people, not only on their rights, but also on their duties as committed citizens to move Africa forward. Africa has to get rid of populist politics, ethnic politics. We need humble leadership. One of the finest biographer of President Thabo Mbeki calls him the philosopher king. I think this is right, because Africa needs leaders who have visions, who reflect from the realities of the past, the future of the continent. We need thoughtful leaders. The ideals of Pan-Africanism should be revived among the African citizenry. Africa is in that unique position more than 300 years of colonialism dispossession when large part of the world, as the anthropologist A.G. Kiernan has said, some parts of that world consider themselves as leaders of humankind. We are downtrodden culturally, not only dispossessed economically, dominated politically, but also culturally despised. So the project of liberation, of reviving the liberation project is also about the unity, the cultural unity of the continent. To regain our dignity before the world. Not only through economic independence, political sovereignty, military institutions, security institutions, which will be able to safeguard the territorial integrities of the countries and the continent. So this is a vast program. The liberation project can be revived only also if the economy of Africa take another turn away from those so-called partnerships, those so-called numerous summits where 54 African heads of state come before one head of state of one country. It's not about only dignity. It's about self-respect. the transformation of economies of Africa are necessary at this time. Everybody, it's time to reason. I'm happy that our banker, Africa Bank CEO, has straightened that issue. Shall we remain providers of raw materials, non-transformed products? Let our arable lands to be auctioned by international investors who will come, produce goods, produce food, and export it, while our populations are dying of hunger? No. African agriculture has to be redeployed in such a way to feed the Africans. African manufacturers, the transformations of our raw materials, can we provide jobs for millions of young people coming every year on the labor market? Without the transformation of our economy, I don't think this is possible. Today, it is necessary for this transformation to happen, and in order for that to happen, not only we need inventive leadership, committed leadership, dedicated leadership, but we need also other segments of society to be mobilized for the economic redemption of Africa. There cannot be we cannot have economic transformation without a social force which will be the instrument, the tool for that economic transformation. Hence, the role of African business. We should not be just so-called partners of multinational corporations. We must have a better ambition. Our ambition should not be to become ever comprador bourgeoisie. But active business people, committed business people who have at heart the well-being of the African people. Whether it is in the realm of finance, banking, industries, manufacturers, agriculture, we need conquering entrepreneurs to lead the African economy. We need an education system from kindergarten to higher education. Madam VC, I hope you will agree with me that it is today imperative that our education system make a break from the colonial type of education we had so far so that our education system will produce, transmit and produce knowledge which will enable our people to stand up in great numbers, in millions, to understand the world in which we live in, and to be armed with the ambition to participate in the progress of mankind, of humankind, in every sector of formation, education, scientific innovation. This is what the renovation, what I call the rebranding, the liberation agenda is about. Ladies and gentlemen, we need today, in some really developmental states on the continent, whose leaders work together, because there is no future for individual undertaking. The scramble for Africa, the new scramble which is taking shape now, is about also weakening the continent to prevent them from harnessing all the potentials of our population through all their segments. It's on the basis of the weakening of the African continent that the new scramble can continue and last forever. We have to avoid this at all costs. So, the liberation project needs at national level the commitment, redoubled commitment of all the citizens, Africa of the citizens. It needs, first and foremost, at continental level, the strengthening of the continental tool. The African Union has marked a step forward from the Organization of African Unity. President Thabo, the Obasanjo, the Muammar Gaddafi, the Meles Zenawi, Abdoulaye Bouteflika have contributed in the early 2000s to the attempt of reshaping the continental instrument, hence the creation of the AU, African Union. However, when we look seriously today at what this instrument has become, we have reasons not to despair, but to be deeply concerned about the way our continental organization function. We all know today that seriously is not fit for purpose. There is a necessity to reform it, not from a technocratic point of view. It is a political organization. which should be used as a catalyst for the deployment, the harnessing all the energies of millions of young people, inventors, scientists, educators, civil society organizations, women organizations, who are keen, mobilized to make this continent once more a continent of hope, a continent of progress, a continent where the people, human beings, will be restored in their dignity. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what I have to put on the table tonight for you. And we belong to a generation which had, as I said, high hopes on our continent. We will never despair. We are optimistic. As comrades in arms, I call on the progressives on this continent through this rostrum to join for the new struggle, to devise new strategies and tactics to make the revolution in Africa a reality according to the dreams of the founding fathers. I thank you for your attention.